I upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that's something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Also, if you haven't yet, new Sixers episode, watch the series. You've heard it a million times. But on with the video. Today I am talking about the possibility of the NBA shutting down once more, because while the NBA has kind of teetered with the risk a little bit of players getting the virus and what that could potentially mean with the new way they have formatted this season, stepping away from the bubble and rather just not having fans in arenas for the most part anyways, and then doing contact tracing, which I don't really know how that works, but that's what they've been doing. There's a possibility that this boils over even with the precautions that the NBA is taking, because yesterday, if you did not know, it started to boil over a little bit, and this could be big news that could lead to something like the NBA suspending its season. Now, I don't think it's going to be as big as last time it was suspended, because the NBA had a bunch of things to figure out in between that period. It wasn't just the fact that the players needed to not play for a little bit. It was also that, well, how do we do this without fans in the arena? How do we format this? And then they eventually came to the decision of the bubble, and then they had to take time to set that up. But the NBA has kind of figured everything out now, so if the season was shut down, I don't think it's going to be nearly as long. But let me talk about why it's a real possibility that it could. I have Adrian Wojnarowski's Twitter pulled up on my phone here. So Sixers guard Seth Curry returned a positive test of the blank, so I don't get demonetized, which the team learned at near the start of the loss to the Brooklyn Nets tonight, whatever. He went to an isolation room immediately after finding out and left the arena separate from the team. Curry spent the first quarter on the bench before the Sixers were made aware of a positive test. Curry then left the court and headed into isolation. Then he says later on that a couple players on the Sixers ended up being forced to quarantine. They're going to be out for a little bit. Joel Embiid is the biggest name among those, because Joel Embiid sat right next to Curry on the bench in that first quarter. They're all wearing masks on the bench, I believe, so I think there's some hope that it's not a big spread thing. But on top of the Sixers being exposed to this also means that Nets players were exposed to this. Ironically, this is the game that Kyrie Irving chose not to go to, so there are people making jokes about him having a third eye and predicting this. Yeah, it's not good. Players have been exposed to the virus, and we've seen in the past that this can lead to a trickle-down effect. It started with Rudy Gobert getting it, and then we realized, wait, shit, Rudy Gobert has played 5 different teams before we figured this out, and those 5 different teams played other teams. So basically every player in the league that touched the court, and even those that were reserves really, were exposed to the virus. For that reason, the season had to be shut down. As I said, I don't think it's going to be as significant if it does happen once more. What I do find interesting is if they would try and go back to a bubble format, because that's originally what I expected them to do. The reason why they went away from it, which is understandable, is that the mental aspect of just the players being in a hotel room for months separate from their family, that definitely has some widespread ramifications for the mental health of the players. And if that was even further long term, we'd see players being very unhappy, and I'd say rightfully so, for basically their entire life being basketball, and then their personal lives are just disregarded because we have to have NBA basketball. So I understand why they made this turn. First of all, some changes that I think they would make. Well, first of all, I should say, if this is hypothetically the season is shut down, NBA players need to have very strict rules in terms of who they can interact with, what they can do out in public, and they really shouldn't even be able to go out in public because they're all millionaires. They all have mansions. They all have access to food that can be delivered to them rather easily. The issue is their families getting it and then them being in contact with them. I don't know all the rules specifically. I also don't know how contact tracing works, as I said. So I think they would just tighten up restrictions in that area, still allow these players to see their families, which is important, but also make sure that they're being cautious. On top of this, I also don't know why there were fans in the arena pretty much, period. There were maybe a few people sporadically who are just there as media people or whatever. That's fine, but Like, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I know the Utah Jazz to start the season had fans in their arena. Even if they're spread really far apart from each other in the seats and they're all wearing masks, there's still a potential of risk, and it's just easier if you eliminate every risk possible. And financially, the NBA stands to benefit more from the season staying than a few fans in an arena. So for the teams that have been having fans, I really don't think they should be doing that. I mean, it's one thing with football games where it's an open arena pretty much everywhere and they're all spread apart. I mean, there are some examples of football teams that from college and the NFL where I think there's been too many people in the arena, and I look and it gives me fucking anxiety when I see that many people next to each other. But the fact that it's open air really makes the virus's spread, from what I understand, a lot less significant, and it spreads a lot. It spreads a lot better in closed environments, like a closed NBA arena. For that reason, no fans. There really should just not be any fans to begin with. There really shouldn't have been, period. But I think that's a step the NBA can take, restricting even further the NBA's rules. I think one positive step in the right direction was the NBA fining the shit out of James Harden for the foolishness he was doing by going to these clubs, regardless of if it was a strip club or not. James Harden, that's not what's really relevant here. It's just kind of funny to say it's a strip club because you're a horny motherfucker. Stuff like that being punished heavily is important. Like, it needs to be understood that this is not something you can play around with. I know also Michael Porter Jr., who is a virus denier. I don't know if he got the virus, but he's being put in quarantine because he exposed himself to it. Michael, regardless of if you believe it's real or not, because it is, but I don't care what you believe. And I'm sure there's going to be people who comment down below some stupid conspiracy theory bullshit. Regardless of if you believe it exists or not, just follow the NBA's rules, please, so you and your team can play NBA basketball and the NBA doesn't get shut down because you're an idiot. Making sure that players that expose themselves and then in turn expose their teammates are not only incentivized based on the fact that it's just a virus, because clearly that's enough, the fact that there is a money risk to them as well, and like a real one, not just like a $25,000 fine to somebody who makes 9 figures. That is going, or not 9, 7 or 8, yeah, whatever, millions of dollars. Making sure that fine is actually big, because I believe James Harden got fined over $500,000 in total. I think it was even more than that. So making those fines severe, making the contact tracing and the restrictions on what players can do a little bit more severe, and fans not being in arena if the NBA does have to shut down. I don't think the bubble idea, again, is viable, on top of the fact that would be including 8 other teams that were not there previously, on top of the fact that doing this over a full season versus like 3 months, it's a different conversation than those 3 months, on top of the fact that these players also had just like a 5-month period of no basketball where they were spending plenty of time with their families. As much as stupid fans of sports can sometimes be like, don't even show up to your child's birth, you should be at your game playing right now. Like, that stuff that infuriates me. Personal life stuff matters more than the sport, and it's important that the players are able to maintain that, but you also want to make sure that you're not having too much risk. So I don't think a bubble is possible, really. I feel like the players would strongly push back against that idea, but you also should not let restrictions be so loose that we see things like this happen. I don't know specifically what happened with Seth Curry. It's also possible to just get this to no fault of their own, so I'm not blaming anybody other than Michael Porter Jr.'s dumbass and James Harden's dumbass. But other than them, there's no real finger to point here. It's just you gotta be careful, and I think the NBA has done a very good job of this thus far. The NFL, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I know they've had a lot of positive tests. The NBA's only had a few, and they've done a good job of making sure it does not spread throughout the league. But what happened the other day with the Nets and the Sixers was scary, and it leads me to wonder if the season being shut down again is a real possibility. Obviously, I'm hoping it's not, because NBA fan, NBA content creator, love NBA basketball, profit off of NBA basketball. So very much hoping that this is just a blip and it's not something to be concerned about. Also, the fact that players might be sitting out games and then that ruins their team's record because of this virus, and then other teams are able to just avoid this. It's kind of like an unfair thing to an extent, and that could cause issues with people like complaining about like, well, this game doesn't really count because Joel Embiid wasn't able to play for the Sixers because he's isolating. That's unfortunate, and I think it's best you try and avoid those situations as much as possible. Obviously, that's not the priority, but that's a part of it. So yeah, that's just some rambling about what the NBA shutting down again might look like, what rules they would potentially implement. I think it would probably be a month off, probably around there, a bunch of tests distributed multiple times for each player, and then we kind of get back to business as it was, and I think just everything would be delayed another month. They might even cut down the games a little bit, but it's definitely not going to be a 5-month break like it was last time. It's not going to seem like, holy shit, is this sport even going to come back? It's definitely going to come back if it happens, and it's going to be a lot more brief, but it's something that could genuinely happen, and I think the NBA might need to take some steps to take just a tad bit more seriously. But those are my thoughts. Check out that Sixers series if you have not yet. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.